Today in our Journeys lesson, we are going to be reading a new story. So the story we are going to be reading today is called A Fairy Tale. Now I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this genre before. A fairy tale is a story with characters that can do amazing things. These stories are very old and have been retold over many years. So our story today, The Three Little Pigs, is a fairy tale. We will be focusing on storytelling phrases. Fairy tales often have storytelling phrases. They begin with once upon a time and end with happily ever after. So as we read in our story, we will be looking for these phrases and be thinking, what do these phrases mean? Before we begin reading The Three Little Pigs, let's look at the picture on our first page. What characters do you see in the picture? We see a pig, and we also see a wolf. Now remember that in a fairy tale, one of our characteristics is that characters can do amazing things. So as you read through our story, be thinking of if the characters are doing anything amazing. So let's get started. The Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there were three little pigs. The first pig made a straw house. Soon he could hear the wolf call out. "Let me come in," said Wolf. "No," said the pig. "I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," Wolf said. "Oh no, our poor first pig, his house made of straw has completely come undone because of that mean wolf." The second pig made a stick house. "Let me come in," said Wolf. "No," said the pig. Oh, what do you think might happen next? We'll see what happens to second pig's house. "I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," Wolf said. Oh no, our second pig's house got completely ruined. The third pig got bricks. He used every brick to make a strong house. Wolf could not blow this house in. Wolf gave up and ran away. The three pigs lived happily ever after. So if we remember when we were talking about our text focus, we often hear storytelling phrases like once upon a time and happily ever after. If you look in our story, it says the three pigs lived happily ever after. What do you think those words mean, and how do these words make you feel? If we say, "and they lived happily ever after," well, if we hear that phrase at the end of the story, then that means that our character will be very happy. So maybe we could say that hearing happily ever after might make us feel happy as well. We also saw at the beginning of our story, if we turn back a few pages, our story began with once upon a time. So, boys and girls, do you remember how we were going to be thinking if we see our characters do anything amazing in the story? Can you think of anything amazing that you saw any of our characters do? Let's look through our story. Do we see anything that the pigs or wolf does that is amazing? Something amazing that our characters did was that the pigs were able to build a very strong house made out of bricks. Now we saw that the wolf huffed and puffed and blew the first pig and the second pig's house down. Now when Wolf got to the third pig's house made of brick, Wolf said he could not blow this house in, and he gave up and ran away. What lesson do you think the wolf may have learned? Some may say that the wolf learned not to bother others. We could also say maybe the wolf learned that he cannot always get what he wants. Because Wolf said, "Let me come in." He wanted to go into these houses. And when the pig said no, he ruined their house. But when the three pigs worked together, the wolf could not blow down the house, even though he wanted to. So now we are going to compare our two stories that we read this week. Our first story we read was Jack and the Wolf. And our second story we just finished was The Three Little Pigs. So we are going to compare our two stories. So let's compare the wolves in our story. Both stories have a wolf character. Let's think of how the wolves are alike and how they are different. We will not be making a chart like it says in the picture here. We are just going to be talking about this. So let's think back in our stories about our wolf characters. How are these two wolves alike? And how are these wolves different? So let's think about that. How are the wolves alike? And how are they different? We could say that in our stories, our wolves are alike. Well, one, because they are both wolves. But we could also say that they scared some of the other characters in the story. If we remember in Jack and the Wolf, when Wolf got up on the rock, all of the sheep and Jack ran away. And in our story that we just read, The Three Little Pigs, the wolf scares the pigs by blowing their house in, and the pigs run away from the wolf. Now, how do we think our wolves are different? We could say that our wolves are different because the wolf in Jack and the Wolf does not have an outfit on, but in The Three Little Pigs, our wolf character is wearing a hat and a shirt and even pants. We can also see that the wolf is standing up and walking around in the three little pigs. And the wolf in Jack and the Wolf is on its 4 legs and walking around using its 4 legs. So our wolf in Jack and the Wolf, I would say, is acting more like a real wolf than how our wolf character acts in the Three Little Pigs. Would you agree? Next, we are not going to write it, but I want you to be thinking about the lesson that Jack learns. Now, we have been discussing the lesson that Jack learns for the past few days. Now, I want you to think about a time that you made a mistake. Think about what lesson you learned after you made that mistake. We will be talking about this during our morning meeting on Friday, so I want you to really be thinking about a time that you made a mistake and what lesson did you learn from it. Next, we are going to read our decodable, Ducks Quack. So if you remember this week in our phonics skills, we were learning the k sound, which is the CK sound. So as we read through our story, be looking for words that end in the k sound. As we read through our decodable, Mrs. Collier will read a sentence, and then I want you to try to read it with me. So let's get started. Look up at the ducks. Ooh, I heard the k sound in the word ducks. So try to read this with me. Look up at the ducks. Quack, quack, quack. Hear the ducks quack. Read it with me. Quack, quack, quack. Hear the ducks quack. Wow, we had a lot of words that end with the k sound. The word quack ends in the CK sound, and we also saw it in the word ducks again. Look at the ducks. Read that with me. Look at the ducks. Ducks can see rocks and mud. With me? Ducks can see rocks and mud. Ducks will nip. Ducks will peck. So let's read that together. Ducks will nip. Ducks will peck. Do you see another word that ends in the k sound? The word peck ends in the k sound. The word rock also ends in the k sound, but we said rocks. So here it ends with an S, but if there were no S, it would just be rock. So these ducks can see rocks and mud. Ducks will go in. Ducks will go in. Ducks will get wet. Ducks will get wet. Ducks will quack. Ducks will quack. Quack, quack, quack. Quack, quack, quack. What 2 words on this page do we hear the k sound? we hear the k sound in the words duck and quack. Look at the ducks. Look at the ducks. Ducks will dip in. Ducks will dip in. Dip, dip, dip. Dip, dip, dip. Ducks will pop back up. Ducks will pop back up. Pop, pop, pop. Pop, pop, pop. Do you see the word on this page that ends in the k sound? The word back. The word back ends in the k sound. Hear the duck on the hill. Hear the duck on the hill. Every duck can quack. Every duck can quack. Quack, quack, quack. Quack, quack, quack. And again, we see the k sound in the word duck and quack. What a fun story learning about all of those ducks. Now we are going to be using our reader's notebook to complete a phonics activity. To end our journeys lesson, you are going to be using your reader's notebook, page 80. So we see page 80 at the bottom of our page if you need to find that in your reader's notebook. So for this activity, we are working with the short A sound, double final consonants, and the CK sound. So that is the A short A sound, the K CK sound, and double final consonants means that the last two letters of the word are the same. So let's read over our words in the box. We have ill, fill, wag, wag, am, yam, ick, quick, van, van, and ek. So, our directions tell us to name each picture and write words from the box. So for each of these problems, you are going to look at the picture and find the word that matches. Now, some of these pictures might look a little bit funny, but make sure you are paying close attention. For example, on number 2, there is an arrow that is pointing to something. The same goes for number 5. Be focusing on what the dog's tail is doing. As you go through each problem, be sure to cross out the word. I will give a hint for number 3 because on number 3 it can be a little bit confusing as to what this picture is. So on number 3, I want you to imagine that this is a hole, and if Mrs. Collier took her marker and I were to do this to the hole, so if that was a hole and I were to put things into that hole, would I fill that hole, wag the hole, yam the hole, quick the hole, van the hole, or neck the hole? I want you to be thinking of that when you get to number 3, because the picture can be a little bit confusing. But once you finish your phonics worksheet with our reader's notebook, then you are all done with your reading lesson for today. Please remember, if you are not in a live intervention today, to be logging on to Imagine Learning for your reading intervention time. I will see you later.